Princess Celestia, the Changeling Queen, by Vren55. Chapter 12, The Drawing of the Lines. War must be, while we defend our lives against the destroyer who would devour all. But I do not love the bright sword for its sharpness, nor the arrow for its swiftness, nor the warrior for his glory. I love only that which they defend. J.R.R. Tolkien, The Two Towers. I usually like my chairs to be as soft and comfortable, preferably covered in a worn velvet, or perhaps by a cool fox leather. However, for a moment, I was yet content with the unyielding support of a high-backed cedar throne. I could not afford to be relaxed. I had not called a meeting of the equestrian chiefs of staff for a year. Thus, it had been a while since I had sat in the equestrian war room. A low, ceilinged oval chamber dominated by a huge table of polished oak. Yet, the centerpiece of this room was the topographical representation of Equestria and her surrounding neighbors. This model was a highly detailed with cities and miniature various landmarks, hills, tiny trees, and mountains. Even a miniature railway line had been built with a diminutive Friendship Express. Scattered throughout the map were miniature ponies holding the standards of various equestrian regiments. I resisted the urge to sigh. Already, the chatter of officers, majors, and generals had filled the war room as they filed into the chamber and took their seats. Back when I was a changeling queen in training, I hadn't needed to go through so much protocol and planning. Then again, I had been only leading around 300 loyal changelings. Now I had an entire nation at my hooves. I saw that Luna was focused on the center of the table, studying some of the troop placements. At the same time, she held several files detailing some of the most updated weapons available to Equestria's military. I briefly picked out the schematic of the newly designed lightning spears. These pole arms were enchanted to deliver bolts of lightning upon impact and would be very useful for our Pegasi cavalry. I then turned to Twilight. My student was nervously stacking and restacking papers. Admittedly, I did pull my student away from the wedding preparations to take the meeting's minutes, but I did not think that attending this meeting would be a good experience. With a final glance at the clock, I decided it was time to begin. Ahem! The buzz of officers and commanders ceased. Raising my voice, I addressed the entire chamber of ponies. Shining Armor, captain of the 2nd Equestrian Royal Guard. Just to my right. My loyal captain snapped a textbook salute. He had abandoned his red wedding parade jacket for his Royal Guard captain armor. His smile was gone, eyes stalwartly facing forward. General Caesar Salad of the 1st Dragoon Guards of the Central Army Group? My eyes searched the room to see Caesar, dressed in his trademark toga, raising his vine stick in acknowledgement. The unicorn was a cranky character, but I knew he was loyal to my cause. Major General Iron Duke of the 88th Manhattan Rangers and the Northeastern Army Group? An earth pony clad in an immaculate red and gold uniform raised his hoof, his face an emotionless stone mask. Most ponies would have been put off by Iron Duke's cold demeanor, but I knew he was a softie. When Twilight was younger, he would always sneak her some candy corn when he thought I wasn't looking. Lieutenant Sharp, 88th Manhattan Rangers. The tan earth pony on the Duke's right, with a deep scar on his right cheek, saluted quickly, albeit with the wrong hoof. I had heard a few things about Sharp from reports sent by his superior, Iron Duke, who wrote, Sharp has absolutely no respect for authority, which is his greatest weakness, and admittedly, his greatest strength. Meringue Lufay, head sorceress of the Royal Equestrian Casters. Instantly, I found the cream-colored hoof of the only pony not wearing a military uniform, and her smile. Meringue was a mystery, even to me. Exceptionally skilled in baking magic, the unicorn could make the best lemon Menrig pie in Equestria, yet she devoted herself to pursuing combat magic to spell doom for Equestria's enemies. All she would ever wear was a simple velvet green cloak and a sorceress's pointy hat of the same color. However, even now I could see officers and some of the generals glancing appreciatively at the enchantress's rich chocolate mane and sparkling green eyes. General Hannibal of the Southeastern Army Group and the 23rd Legion Entourage d'Equestria. After searching the table, I picked out my old friend's dark brown coat and blinked. The Earth Pony was wearing a distinctive gold leaf helmet and polished cuirass of interlinked bronze discs. It was the armor I had awarded to her for leading a deadly, successful campaign against the marauding southern dragons. I grinned happily, pleased at her gesture, and she responded with the predatory smile I had taught her. Lieutenant General Bloodyguts, Western Army Group, 12th Van Hoover Artillery Regiment. A rather plain-faced unicorn in brown army jackets and a fox fur overcoat raised his hoof. I had always wondered how Guts had gotten his name. The stallion was always so normal, almost ordinary. But ever since I had assigned him his command, the Western Army Group has had not a single fatality. Colonel Stonewall, 5th Lost Pegasus Royal Hussars. A solidly built earth pony with rather impressive sideburns as well as a beard stood and saluted. He wore a gray-blue uniform with a cap and a long saber at his side. From what I heard, he was a capable officer, skilled in leading attacks and holding strategic positions. Marshal Erman Rommel, Royal Equestrian Air Command and Co. of the Cloudsdale Blues. A middle-aged Pegasus in a neatly ironed dark gray uniform gave me a solemn salute. Ermain was a former Wonderbolt, and it showed in his muscled frame, which sported remarkably large wings. From his lapel hung the golden cross of Equestria, matching his gold and yellow fur. I'd given him the award after he had led a squadron to a victory over an entire air wing of Griffin bandits and sent them back to Griffonia with their tails between their legs. Finally, I read the last name on the list. Captain Vlad Pikehead of the Lunar Guard. Looking up, I observed the Thestral salute. His family, in fact, his entire tribe, were longtime members in the Lunar Guard. I had maintained the Guard during my rule and protected the Thestrals, despite the headache I suffered from the decision. I believe the gamble had paid off. The continued existence of the Lunar Guard really helped Luna's reintegration with equestrian society, and the Lunar Guard was highly useful to the equestrian army as an elite stealth force. With the attendance completed, I raised myself from my chair, addressing all of my commanders. Thank you all for coming here with such short notice. As you are aware, Canterlot was attacked by a changeling force. Their leader, Queen Chrysalis, imprisoned my niece, Princess Cadence, and took her form. She then proceeded to hypnotize Captain Shining Armor by siphoning off his love energy. Chrysalis weakened the security shield we had erected, allowing her forces to break into Canterlot. I paused and grimaced. Chrysalis also imprisoned my own student, Twilight Sparkle, in the crystal mines that lie underneath Canterlot because she was perceptive enough to see through her disguise. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Twilight trying to hide her blush behind her papers. But Chrysalis made a critical mistake. She imprisoned Twilight with my niece. Together, they were able to break out of the mines and reveal her true identity. A little of my anger must have leaked through my mask, because some of the officers shivered at my tone. However, it was too late. The Queen had siphoned too much of Captain Armor's magic. The shield was compromised, and it fell. The Changeling army assaulted right after. After she was unmasked, I confronted Chrysalis, but she had siphoned off too much of Captain Armor's love, and I was subsequently defeated. Princess Luna, who had been preparing for the wedding reception, was ambushed by a changeling battalion. Special mention goes to Captain Flat and his lunar guard for protecting my sister while she dealt with the threat. Vlad grinned as the other generals nodded their approval. I sent my student and her friends to get the elements of harmony, but they were intercepted. The only reason why I am talking to you today is that Cadence and Captain Armor combined their magical reserves and channeled it into a shield spell, repelling the changelings from Canterlot. But we cannot confirm Chrysalis's death, and neither can we confirm if she can mount a counter-offensive. Luna took over, the iron authority in her voice resounding throughout the room. The goal for this gathering is to determine Equestria's course of action. Primarily, we would protect our cities and how we should respond to this changeling threat. We would like to hear thy suggestions. There was a momentary pause as the various commanders processed the information. To my surprise, Caesar was the first to raise his hoof. I suggest we first increase the Canterlot garrison and have a second royal guard undergo an independent review of all its procedures. Then we should have the rest of the other cities' garrisons checked for infiltrators. I raised an eyebrow. I agree that a review should be conducted in light of the ineffectiveness of the royal guard, but I didn't quite understand why Caesar was insisting that it should be independent. Neither did Shining Armor, as he spoke right up after Caesar. Begging your pardon, General Salad, but I think the Royal Guard can conduct its own investigation into the matter. Caesar shook his head. Captain Armor, let me be blunt. Your regiment's performance at the royal wedding was disastrous. I blinked and my captain's eyes narrowed. I knew there would be some resentment regarding the invasion of Canterlot, but I never realized the discussion was going to take up such an ugly turn. I can understand why your shield failed. You were hypnotized after all. But just because you were taken in by a changeling disguised as your own wife doesn't mean the entire royal guard has the right to collapse in on itself and cease to be an effective fighting force. According to reports, almost all royal guard were incapacitated or isolated within 15 minutes. Your Highness, you were captured by Chrysalis herself, and somehow no punny was able to assist you. I demand to know, Captain Armor, how could you let this military disaster happen? Roared Caesar. His vine stick pointed like a spear at Shining Armor. I said nothing, knowing that I had let my captain defend his own actions against his superior. I had been alerted to a possible threat by Princess Celestia, although at the time we were not sure what the threat was, neither the size of it. Given the lack of information, I decided to deploy the Royal Guard to maximize security against a small group of individual attacks. Hence, I spread the Royal Guard out in small 5-pony squads with several key rally points established within the city, including the guard barracks, the train station, and Canterlot Castle itself. Moreover, I also put my shield spell up. However, this formation was wholly inadequate against the large-scale air-to-ground assault that took place. The patrol sizes were too small, and the changelings were able to isolate and overwhelm them. Had we been aware of the scale of the changeling attack, I would have deployed my troops in a different fashion. However, we weren't able to. Caesar was still frowning, but he had put his vine stick back down. The other officers were murmuring their grudging approval. What I do wish to know is, how could such a large air force sneak into attacking range of Canterlot without any warning whatsoever? Asked Shining Armor. I nodded at my captain's question, for it perplexed me as well. Just how was my sister able to sneak an entire changeling army into the middle of Equestria if her hive was in the Badlands? Marshal Ermain, Do you have any explanation for this? You are in charge of monitoring the airspace near Canterlot and Cloudsdale, after all, said Caesar snidely. Rommel glared at Caesar. We appear to have been infiltrated by changelings that changed the schedules of the patrols. This created an hour-long gap timed exactly for the last vows of the wedding. Admittedly, there could have been more patrols, but we had just completed joint exercises with the Lost Pegasus Hussars, and I was loath to tax my exhausted troops any further. Besides, who would have expected an entire changeling army to slip past the Southern Army Command? I held back a groan, silently wishing her mane could have been less blunt. Now all the officers of the Southern Army Command were furious. Annabelle herself had risen to her hooves, dark eyes flashing menacingly. Do not even think about blaming my troops for your mistakes. It is our responsibility to protect the ponies in the south, but there's no way we could have covered the entire border. And has every pony forgotten that these are changelings and that they can disguise themselves as ordinary ponies? We don't even know how long the changelings' plans have been in motion. I didn't disagree with Hannibal, although the general did have 3 regiments, including her Foreign Legion, based in Baltimore. There was no way the entire border could have been watched, not at the current mobilization levels, especially since she was dealing with changelings. Your inability to keep an eye on movements within your own turf, Hannibal, has almost cost us our capital, retorted Caesar. I was about to rebuke Caesar, but was cut off by a hoof slamming on the table. Turning, I blinked his Iron Duke. A snarl on his normally restrained features rose on his hind legs. Caesar, that's enough. If General Hannibal had spread her forces wide enough to cover the entire border, she would have run the risk of her cities being overrun by any unforeseen threats. We should be lucky that none of the southern cities have ever been attacked by changelings. Besides, Caesar, where were your dragon guards? Inquired Bloody Guts. The pony still lying laconically on his seat. It was like all the chatter and buzz in the chamber was sucked out. I watched Caesar bite his lip and squirm uncomfortably in his chair, as the weight of so many gazes began to bore on him. I wanted to step in and spare the old commander the pressure he was facing, but my curiosity would not abate. The Dragoon Guards were my elite guards ponies. They didn't watch over me from day to day like the standard Royal Guard, but when I had personally led campaigns or in emergency situations, they were the first on the scene. I had heard nothing about their involvement in the attack on Canterlot, and I needed to know why. The Dragoon Guards were deployed right after we saw the shield fall. We engaged the changelings, with the objectives being the reclamation of the main castle. However, when I heard of your fall, we changed our priorities to securing Princess Luna and evacuating Canterlot. My eyes widened, barely noticing the outcries and the gasps of the surrounding ponies. My decision at the time was undertaken chiefly because Her Highness had fallen. This meant the chrysalis was stronger than Her Highness, and therefore it would be foolish to try and confront the Changeling Queen. To make a stand with Princess Luna, who had only recently recovered from being purified by the elements of harmony, would be a foolish mistake. Canterlot was being ambushed, and we had also received news that the Second Royal Guard was in complete disarray. Not to mention, we had lost contact with the Lunar Guard in the chaos. While I could have ordered the Dragoon Guard to retake the castle proper, I was unsure if we could really deal with Chrysalis if she was able to defeat Her Highness. Thus, I attempted to curb our losses and create an opportunity to reassemble our forces against this new threat, explained Caesar. To my annoyance, I realized that at that moment of my apparent death, things must have looked horribly grim from a tactical standpoint. Inwardly, I groaned as I was reminded of my mistake of underestimating my sister. I appreciate your cautionary judgment, Caesar, but rest assured, the next time I confront Chrysalis... Your Highness, under no circumstances should you confront Chrysalis again without the support of our military, exclaimed Caesar. I felt my eyes widened as the normally deferential guardsman interrupted me. And why precisely should I obey that order? I demanded, my voice caustic. This time it was Bloody Guts who spoke up. With all due respect, Your Highness, you were defeated by Chrysalis. We cannot risk losing you again. If Chrysalis is stronger than you are, we must take this into account, as your chief target will be you. If you are actually stronger than her and can explain why you failed to stop her, then we will do our best to trap Chrysalis in a favorable confrontation with you. My shoulders tensed, and I struggled not to flinch. I had always deliberately kept my generals in the dark as to how powerful I really was. It was a ploy meant to keep them in awe of me and to protect myself. Now they had begun to doubt, to question. I was no longer invincible. The point is, Your Highness, is Chrysalis stronger than you? I opened my mouth, but words would not form in my brain. My thoughts receded like the tide going out, leaving only excruciating blankness. No, she isn't, I finally croaked. My throat suddenly dry and rough as desert sand. I couldn't let them know I messed up, that I had underestimated my sister and let her overpower me. I couldn't let my generals know that despite my long years of hoarding love away, I was afraid of my sister. I was afraid she was stronger than me. The sun and moon were cruel burdens and sapped most of the love I had gathered. My power was great, but I never truly knew the extent of my sister's might. She had had years to perfect and hone her enhanced changeling abilities, including the hypnotism she had used on Shining Armor. Granted to her for being an ascended queen, I had never ascended. In that respect, I had a distinct disadvantage. If my generals knew about this, they would worry for me, fret about my safety. Chrysalis was my fight. No punny else's. But how was it that you were defeated by Chrysalis, then? Asked Iron Duke. Even Hannibal, who I had taught as a filly, looked uneasily at me. It doesn't matter, I said dismissively. My officers protested, but I ignored them, shutting out their exclamations. But Princess, it does matter. You're talking about your life here, argued Hannibal. I snarled, furious at the doubt of my own officers, of my own captains. Hurriedly, I suppressed my rage, but the room was silent once more. Captain, I appreciate the sentiment, but I can handle Chrysalis on my own, I said. But even as I spoke, I felt my statement's emptiness. Princess Celestia, stuttered a voice. I turned to see Twilight, her hoof raised, her stack of notes on the table. Every pony here is just concerned for your safety. Please, we know that you want to protect every pony from Chrysalis, and that you don't want any pony to worry. I observed a few of my officers coughing from being told what they knew. But Caesar, Hannibal, and the rest of my elite commanders simply nodded in agreement. If you could please tell us how and why you lost to Chrysalis, every pony can help you think of ways to triumph over her the next time you meet, concluded my faithful student. I sighed. It's not as simple as that, Twilight. Chrysalis is too dangerous for any pony other than myself to face. May Celestia strike me down if I involved any more ponies than I had to do in my conflict with my sister. Shining Armor's raised hoof caught my attention. Princess, this is Equestria's fight, not just your fight with chrysalis. She has attacked our capital, declaring war. If you lose, Equestria loses. You may want to protect us, but we are already involved in this conflict. Not letting us know how powerful you are will not allow us to plan for the inevitable confrontation between Chrysalis and her hive. You will be endangering us instead of aiding us. I almost groaned aloud. Why did every pony seem to come up with so many reasonable arguments against me? Damn this stupid disguise. If only I could just tell every pony that Chrysalis was my traitorous sister and that I reserved the right to punish her for killing our mother. I assure you all I can deal perfectly well with Chrysalis by myself. My defeat at the royal wedding was a mistake on my part. I underestimated Chrysalis and never used all of my strength. I conceded. My generals grumbled, annoyed. They couldn't get the information they wanted. Some seemed comforted, though. If that's the case, Princess, I guess we don't have anything to worry about. I mean, even not at full power, I heard you were able to make Chrysalis squirm quite a bit. If we were ever to launch an attack on Chrysalis's hive, I'm pretty sure that you would be able to deal with her. At least on equal footing. Not that we know where Chrysalis's hive is, anyway, said Hannibal. It is in the Badlands. Likely in the Grand Canyon, informed Luna, placing an onyx black miniature changeling onto the model. Every pony on the room stared once again at Luna, who blushed. We have captured some changelings, and our interrogations with them have revealed the location of their hive. There was a great hubbub as the revelation of the changeling's hive's location caused the officers to go into a frenzy. Well, what are we waiting for, Your Highness? Give us the order and we'll crush them, declared Hannibal excitedly. General Hannibal, I do not believe that would be the best course of action. While I don't doubt the capability of your forces, any attack on the changeling's home will be met with great resistance. Most likely, great casualties, warned Bloody Guts. Guts, I don't see a problem with her strategy. As long as we plan this out carefully, it should work. A quick, decisive strike from both the air and ground will envelop the canyon, pin them in the ravine, and defeat them, pointed out Ermaine. The problem, Generals Ermaine and Bell, one I am rather shocked that you are not aware of, is that Equestria's military is not offense-oriented. We are in no position to launch an offense of any type against an enemy nation, growled Caesar. Salad, we won't win this war by fighting defensive. We have to take the battle to the enemy, retorted Hannibal. On the contrary, Hannibal, given Equestria's railway system that connects every city to Canterlot, on the positioning of regiments within every major city, we should be quite well suited to fight a defensive war. The changelings will have to throw themselves out at our fortified troops and garrisons, where we can win any battles handedly, said Iron Duke. Hannibal looked murderous, but Shining Armor held up his hoof. I understand your argument, Iron Duke, but the changelings probably know we are better at defense. Coming from personal experience, I know that the changelings are experts in infiltration. Shining Armor bit his lip in embarrassment as the room filled with chuckles and raised eyebrows. They could have scouted the layouts of our regiments and already infiltrated our armies. If they train and prepare for a calculated offensive strike, they have a chance of actually doing damage. I do believe we will win in the long run, but we need to be aware that they know we will be on the defensive. My captain raised a valid point. My sister would have undoubtedly scouted out my forces. Burrowing in was not without its risks. I agree with Captain Armor. Colonel Stonewall? I asked. Stonewall paused for a moment and then spoke quickly. I would also like to end this conflict as decisively as possible. Anything else will prove a drain on our military resources. Already mistrust is forming within our ranks. If this situation drags on, our forces will begin to lose their morale. It was then Lieutenant Sharp slammed his hoof on the table and snarled, making most of us jump in our seats. Are you all mad? That's how we actually do manage to get across the desert, approaching the Changelings' homeland without our armies being harassed and our supply lines being cut by infiltrators running amok in our ranks and at home. What then? Our regiments aren't even fully mobilized yet, and most of the soldiers in them are untrained greenhorns who haven't seen any battle worth remembering. Our commissioned officers are noble bureaucrats who posture with all their fop and knowledge, but don't know a thing when it comes to soldiering. The entire table began to bristle. Hannibal looked as if she might fly across it to beat Sharp up, and her mane had fixed the lieutenant with dagger-like glowers. As for myself, I was quietly considering Sharp's points. The lieutenant was right about the dangers of launching an attack. I knew that there was no way chrysalis infiltrated this meeting of military officials. The encryption of the notice meant that I was the only changeling in this room. The risk that was posed by even lower-level military officers or even civilian contractors working with the military was still too high, though, for my liking. Regrettably, I also realized that Sharp's assessment of the majority of commissioned officers was correct. Even if they weren't noble bureaucrats, most of my lower-ranked commissioned officers lacked actual combat experience. That's enough from you, Sharp, rebuked Iron Duke coldly. Still, Duke, your subordinate does raise a valid point. Even if he doesn't exactly present it in the best way, I remarked, directing the last of my statement to the loud-mouthed lieutenant, forcing Sharp to gulp and sit back in his chair. With a nod, I turned to Vlad. Captain, what is your opinion? The Thestral snorted. It's quite obvious, Your Highness. Chrysalis's changelings are like dogs, backed into a corner. If we were to attack them, they have no escape. But they know that, so they will fight as hard as they can. Attacking would throw us in a whole cauldron of shit. But that's not all. If we are to believe this is the main hive of the changelings, then we should consider that their young are there, and that these changelings will fight like demons out of Tartarus. We'd be properly buggered if we lay siege to Chrysalis's hive, Princess. Although I winced slightly at Vlad's language, I did not refute his advice. Changelings, similar to ponies, were quite protective of their young, and by extension, of their hive. Confronting the changelings at their hive would almost certainly lead to a fierce battle to the death. You've put it rather crudely, Captain Vlad, but I can understand where you're coming from. I turned to Luna. She had been silent for a long time and was peering closely at the model of Equestria. Sister, do you have any insights you wish to share with us? Luna started scattering some of the papers in front of her to the ground. Taking a breath, she paused, head bowed as if to collect her thoughts, and directed her attention to the other officers. Commanders, right now we appear to stand at a crossroads. Some of these suggest that we should attack the changelings in all our power and strength of arms. Yet others have suggested that it would be unwise to launch an assault at the changelings, and that we should fortify ourselves and sit through this storm. Luna pointed at the tiny black flag representing the changeling hive in the Badlands. To those of you who suggest to attack, we can see the advantages of thy strategy. To end the war quickly in a swift stroke is an admirable sentiment. What is more, we have regiments positioned in the area that are capable of accomplishing the task. An indigo glow surrounded 4 plastic ponies, representing 3 separate regiments, slowly. They arranged themselves in a rough circle around the changeling statuette. If we have the Foreign Legion supported by the Cloudsdale Blues and Los Pegasus Hussars, we should be able to lay siege to the changeling's hive. Ermaine, Hannibal, and Stonewall grinned eagerly as the princess examined the deployment of figurative troops. I almost started a sudden flare of magic, roasted the flags the plastic ponies held into charcoal. The legs of the pony miniatures themselves were swiftly amputated, and they rolled ignominiously into the desert. Thou art fools to think that such a siege would be successful. We know nothing about our enemy other than where they are. Who is to say that chrysalis has reserves of changelings we do not know about? What if there are traps in the Badlands? Even if we can achieve victory, at what cost shall we pay? Demanded Luna. With a flash of her horn, the plastic figurines were repaired and replaced back in their original places. Glancing back at her mane, Hannibal and the others who had advocated for a quick assault, it seemed quite obvious that they had been chagrined at their princess's opinion. Then there are others who wish to burrow into the ground, draw strength from our existing defenses to weather out the storm, as one says. We must commend thy reasoning, for Equestria, as it is strongest on the defensive. But staying in the defensive, we can fight on our home ground, where we can dictate the field of battle and fight where our supply network is extensive, commented Luna, gesturing to the railway track, as well as the individual garrisons within the cities. I noticed Sharp and Vlad nodding eagerly, but Caesar and Iron Duke merely observed Luna warily. Yet what then? Asked Luna. The changeling figure, surrounded by Luna's blue magic, charged at the pony miniature representing the 88th Rangers in it. The changeling deflected off the pony figure and hit the Statue of Liberty, breaking its torch off. Turning around, the changelings rammed into the figurine of the Lunar Guards. An ear snapped off the changeling. The Lunar Guard figurine was knocked over. Zipping around the map, the miniature changeling knocked into several buildings, tore up several tiny fields, and ran into more toy regiments until the figure was cracked and dented beyond recognition. Aye, we will win, but see the consequences of merely standing on the defensive? This is not like your typical war, where we have one united front. Chrysalis's changelings have the ability to strike literally anywhere, as demonstrated by their assault on Canterlot. Besides, one does not win a battle by being purely on the defensive. We will have to attack. I take it that you have a plan then, sister? I inquired. Luna nodded. Her horn glowing, she repaired the model and replaced the figurines again. We should first deal with the infiltrators among us and solidify our defenses. When that is finished, we should do everything in our power to prepare for an attack on Chrysalis's hive. Once again, gripped in an indigo glow, all of the miniature pony regiments danced to the Badlands. With a well-planned offensive, we can defeat Chrysalis effectively and not have to worry about being stabbed in the back. Quickly, the plastic ponies surrounded the changeling statuette and buried it under their combined weight. I smiled at Luna admiringly. Her plan was brilliant, simple, yet effective. Turning my plan and attention to the map of Equestria and its surrounding lands, I said, A sound plan, sister. Let us... Your Highness! Beg your pardon for interrupting you, but have we tried negotiating with the changelings yet? Asked Meringue Le Fay innocently. You could have heard a pin drop. In Ponyville, in Pinkie Pie's soundproof testing laboratory for party cannon prototypes. That was how quiet the room became at the sorceress's question. Every pony's eyes now focused on the two of us, their faces impassive as the castle stones. No, we have not. It was an option I and my sister had not considered, I admitted sheepishly. What if the changelings refuse? What would you propose then, Meringue? Demanded Caesar Salad. If we can save our ponies from this conflict, then we should do so. You all know as well as I do, war is a messy business. No pony will benefit from fighting, said Meringue slowly, the enchantress's voice cold like a Wendigo's breath. I decided to quickly quell any dissatisfaction before things got out of hoof, and raised my voice. I agree with Meringue. I and my sister will personally draw up a proposal to be delivered to Chrysalis via the changeling prisoners we have captured. Moreover, to ensure that our terms are made clear to every pony, they will also be distributed to the press. Personally, I doubt that Chrysalis would ever negotiate with ponies, but now that I reconsider the issue, it had been 1,000 years ago. Perhaps my sister would see reason? "But Princess!" gasped Shining Armor. "Captain, I know this is hard for you, but if there is an option to spare lives of our soldiers and any civilians, we should take it," I said to Shining Armor. The stallion cringed and sighed. "I understand, Your Majesty," said Shining. Twilight took a break from her notes to place a comforting hoof on her brother's shoulder. Shining Armor smiled gratefully at the gesture. "Your Highness, we can't negotiate with all these changelings," shouted a voice. Generals, commanders, and observers turned to focus on Golden Star. Internally, I winced at the cacophonous jingling of his metals. "And why not?" I asked, barely able to suppress my irritation at the Major. "Because they are savages, and would put down as much without any conditions, like barbarians. They attacked Canterlot and ran havoc in our streets. We need to pay them back and even the scales." Golden Star's raging rant suddenly petered into silence. I noticed all of my generals were averting the gazes away from mine. While some of my general subordinates were covering their eyes in fear, Twilight had sprang away from me as if I had suddenly burst into flame. "Thou impugnest thy station, Golden Star. Dost thou imply that we, once Nightmare Moon, did not deserve to live? What right dost thee have to pass judgment on to an entire race?" growled Luna. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Luna's ice blue of a glare of a winter's blizzard that could cut through bone. Her black pupils were as dark as a starless night, devoid of compassion. A void. Shakily bowing his head, Major Golden Star resumed his seat. "Golden Star, I understand you are worried about Canterlot's safety, but we promise that any terms and conditions that I and my sister will agree upon will not endanger our ponies, nor put them in any disadvantage," I explained grudgingly. Golden Star relaxed, his fears slightly abated. "Moreover, there are two crucial pieces of information we must impart to all of thee," added Luna. Taking a deep breath, Luna narrowed her eyes. "According to our interrogations with several captured changelings, Chrysalis's hive has suffered a shortage of love. We are not sure how great, but it was serious enough to warrant her extreme action of attacking Canterlot." Hastily sucked in breaths and widened eyes met Luna's announcement. I even noticed some guilty glances. Not surprisingly, no pony expected the changelings to have such a valid reason for attacking Canterlot. Even Golden Star appeared abashed at his earlier actions. The visages of my senior officers only appeared to become more grim, and their hooves tapped worriedly on the table. "Your Highnesses, this does open the possibility of changelings negotiating out of desperation. However, it also means that if we go to war, it will be unlikely that Chrysalis will surrender," pointed out Shining Armor. "But what caused this shortage? They haven't attacked us either. If they are in a shortage," asked Meringue. "This is the second piece of information we must disclose to thee." The Alicorn paused for a moment to make sure every pony was listening. "There is another hive, other than Chrysalis's. A hive that can match Chrysalis's forces, perhaps on equal terms. A hive that has not revealed itself to us as of yet, but has attacked Chrysalis's, possibly forcing her to attack Canterlot." Hastily drawn-in breaths and mutters of astonishment and fear filled the room. Twilight stared up at me in apprehension. Glancing reassuringly to her, I rapped the blade table with a gold-clad hoof. At once the room became silent. I nodded to signal Luna to continue, and with a graceful smile, she did. We cannot accurately predict the consequent actions of the hive. Should Equestria declare war on chrysalises, what we do know is that we must be cautious. Hence, whilst we will send the changelings our terms of negotiations, we will prepare for war. Luna took a deep breath and spoke to the entire chamber of military personnel. Now was the moment to suggest the measure that I and Luna had discussed prior to meeting. Generals, we are asking thee to order a full mobilization of Equestria's armed forces, the EAF. I watched as Twilight almost broke the nib of her quill. My officers panicked like frightened chickens. I didn't begrudge them, though. The Equestrian army had never fully mobilized in the lifetime of these ponies. There had been some major skirmishes and short campaigns fought on the borders, and times when entire regiments needed to be mobilized, but never the entire army. It was what Equestria paid for after years of peace. My reflection was interrupted as Caesar Salad slammed his vine stick on the table, silencing the hubbub of aides and officers. With a cough, the general addressed me directly. Princess, I cannot speak for every pony in this room, but I, for one, approve of your decision. If it comes to war, only our might can withstand this onslaught. Spoken well, old codger, quipped Annabelle. Caesar responded by rolling his eyes at the mare. One by one, the commanders and generals gave their approval of the plan to mobilize. As the final affirmation was given by Shining Armor, I realized that there was something I had to say. I hadn't planned this. With Luna. In fact, I really owed it to Golden Star's outburst. So I stood on my hind legs, my hooves braced against the cool surface of the table, and head proudly raised. Before we move on to discuss the details of our strategy to defeat the changelings, I have one last piece of advice for you all. I announced. My officers, commanders, generals, Twilight, her friends, and Luna looked at me expectantly, wondering what I was going to say. I know that Major Golden Star and many others are angry at the changelings for what they have done to us. Some of the officers squirmed uncontrollably, thinking that I was going to rebuke them. I sighed. It was not so unreasonable to demonize a species that had only so far shown hostility and deceit of such a heinous nature. Although Golden Star certainly annoyed me, I did realize that his anger towards Chrysalis perhaps was not as different as my own. You have every reason to do so. I, for one, really want to get back at Chrysalis for what she did to my niece. Some of my officers gulped and nervously adjusted their shirt collars. Seeing their unease, I took a deep breath to get my temper back in control. Yet, at the moment we start fighting the changelings for revenge, we will have already lost. We would be no better. No, we would have stooped to a level lower than they have. These changelings may have hurt us, struck fear into us, and infiltrated our dreams. But what do we gain by attempting to commit genocide on them? I directed this question to the entire room, making ponies squirm in their chairs. Nothing. Only more tears, a legacy of death and guilt that would turn us into monsters. Equestria must not lose against these changelings, that is for sure. But they attacked us because they were hungry. Do we really have the right to deny a species their food? Remember, my little ponies, we must not only seek victory on the battlefield, we must prevail in preserving our way of life, our beliefs, and our harmony. This fight will not be easy, but with your help, we will win this struggle of swords and of hearts. Okay, side note from me. I've recorded this on 2 separate days, around the Gloward line, actually, if some of you are reading this after. So some of the voices might be a little bit off. I had to stop the recording earlier on because my voice actually like started going, and then the next 2 days I wasn't home as I had things I was doing, so I wasn't able to upload for like 3 days. This is the first day I've really gotten actually like time that I was able to do something since getting back. I'll return, of course, to this. It didn't help that both the last two chapters were relatively long in comparison. I deleted the old episode. It actually had quite a few views, but the reason I deleted it was because I was just gonna do this all in one part, just connect them together. And two, I actually didn't put the audio suppression in the background, so I didn't. I don't actually usually go through these and check them for audio issues too often, but I found out that the noise suppression has helped. I've been doing it in the last few episodes. I forgot to do it on the last one, so this also gave me an excuse to do that. So I'm just gonna re-upload this. Tomorrow will be a new one. Yeah. So sorry if it wasn't too much new today, even after 3 days, but I'm hoping it goes well, and things will hopefully be better in the next few days. Thank you.